Hello, everyone. Please turn to page 26 of your chapter 6 notes, chapter 7 notes. We're going to finish the notes that we did not finish on the block day, examples F, G, and H. And today's problems are all need the calculator in the notes. Some of the ones in your homework might not need the calculator, but all the ones in your notes need a calculator because none of them are going to be in the notes nice answers from the unit circle. So everyone get out your graphing calculators, and you have to have a graphing or scientific calculator to do the problems today. And you also need to know how to store values. So let me first talk about, let me clear all of this. So let me first remind you about a few things about your calculator. So if you press mode, all of them today should be in the radian mode. If you're not in radian mode, just use your arrows, go down to it. If it's on degrees, just go to radians and press enter. And then go back to the home screen. And just so you know, because we're going to be storing, the store button is to the left of the 1. So for instance, say I want to store 9 as X. I press 9 and then the store button, which gives me the arrow, and then I can press X. You can do any letter you want. I usually do this button first, the X, comma, T, comma, theta, comma, N button, because it immediately comes up as X if you're in function mode. Okay, so now to the first problem on your notes. So this one says cosine of theta equals negative 0.9. So therefore, I know theta equals the inverse cosine of negative 0.9, or the angle whose cosine is negative 0.9. We're still sticking with radians today because these are problems out of the book. So in order to do that, it's not a unit circle value, so you have to use a calculator. So you go to your calculator and you press second cosine for inverse cosine, and then do negative 0.9. Enter. Okay, so it tells me that the principal value where the cosine equals negative 0.9 is about 2.69. You're going to want to store that. So press the stow button, and then I'm going to store it as X and enter. And then if you clear the screen, every single time you press X, it's still there. And you don't have to worry about it messing up anything else. It's just going to be in the home screen. So now that we have that, let's go back to your notes. And what we're going to do, I wrote down the PV. So remember, whenever you have an inverse cosine, you go straight to the principal value. And again, we did that in the calculator because it's not from the unit circle, and I stored that as X. Then we're going to write our two general solutions. So cosine, remember, is PV plus 2 pi n and negative PV plus 2 pi n. So you should write 2.69 plus 2 pi n and negative 2.69 plus 2 pi n. Remember, though, it is not exactly 2.69. It's approximately, and that's why we stored it. You always want to have the exact answer stored in your calculator. So then you're going to make your table. And I made it separately, but you can make it right on there if you want. And if you plug in 0, you get 2.69 for your first one and negative 2.69 for your second one. We still want to only find answers between 0 and 2 pi. And since we're using decimals, just realize that pi, actually, I'll show you on the calculator. Pi is, everyone should know this, about 3.14. But if you do 2 pi is about 6.28. So you don't want to get any numbers that are bigger than 6.28. So of course, this negative number is not between 0 and 2 pi. And then if you plug in 1, you get 8.97 and 3.59. Now, let me make sure you guys know how to do this in the calculator. So you want to do this whole thing in the calculator with stored values. So what you do is you're going to do, remember we stored X as our PV. So you're going to go X plus, and then to get 2 pi, type 2, and then do second and the caret button, because above the caret button is pi. And that gives you the 8.97, which you hopefully see is too big. That's bigger than 6.28. And then to get the second one, remember the second one was negative PV plus 2 pi n. So you're going to go negative X, because we stored our PV as X, and then go plus 2 pi, because we're plugging in 1 for n, so it's just 2 pi. And that gives us the 3.59, and that is okay. So that's why when we write our final particular solutions, the two answers are 2.69 and 3.59. Okay, so now we're going to do example G, and it tells us that the sine of theta is 0.4, and then you can change that to theta equals the inverse sine of 0.4, or the angle whose sine is 0.4. This is still radians. Even if you change 0.4 to 2/5, you know that's not on the unit circle, so we have to use a calculator again. So in your calculator, hold on, my screen's being weird. Let me get my calculator. Oops, wrong thing, sorry. In your calculator, type second sine of positive 0.4, and we get 0.41. Now, I'm going to go ahead and store that as x. Now, for sine, you're going to have to store two different things, but go ahead and store that as x. And then remember that the second one for sine is pi minus the PV. So I'm going to go back to the paper. So our two ones for sine are PV plus 2 pi n, and then pi minus PV plus 2 pi n. So our two solutions are going to be 0.41, which is our PV that we stored as x, plus 2 pi n. And then the second one is pi minus 0.41 plus 2 pi n. And you're going to want to simplify that pi minus 0.41 in your calculator. So in your calculator, remember we stored our PV as x. So you're going to go second pi, which is above the caret, and then go minus x. And that is what you're going to store. And store it as something other than x, otherwise I'll overwrite it. So I'm going to store it as alpha a. And now it's stored as alpha a. So now your two solutions, that's 2.73. So now your two solutions are 0.41 plus 2 pi n and 2.73 plus 2 pi n. Again, we got the 2.73 from pi minus 0.41, and then we store that as a. So if you plug in 0, you'll see that both of those are going to give you solutions between 0 and 2 pi. Remember, 2 pi is approximately 6.28 in degrees. Because they're both positive, if you plug in positive 1, you're going to get numbers that are too big. So this one only has two solutions, 0.41 and 2.73. And I forgot to mention, we are rounding to the hundredths place today. Do one more example, and then this one is 5 tangent of theta plus 9 equals 1. So first thing you want to do is get tangent of theta by itself. So subtract 9, then you have 5 tangent of theta equals negative 8, and then you're going to divide by 5. So you're going to end up with tangent of theta is negative 8/5. Again, not on the unit circle. So to get theta by itself, you're going to say theta equals the inverse tangent of negative 8/5. And that's what we're going to put in our calculator. So in your calculator, do the inverse tangent, second tangent of negative 8/5. And go ahead and store that as x. Tangent only has one general solution, so that you're only going to have to store this one thing. It's only for sine that you'll have to store two different things. So now remember, our general solution for tangent is just PV plus pi n. And so we already stored negative 1.01 as x. And so then your general solution is negative 1.01 plus pi n. If you plug in 0, you get negative 1.01. That's too small. We just want answers between 0 and 2 pi, or 0 and 6.28. Now, if you plug in 1 and 2, you're going to need to use your calculator. So go back to your calculator. Now remember, we stored our principal value as x. So in your calculator, you're going to want to go pi x plus pi, and that's when you're plugging in 1 for n. And then you're going to want to do x plus 2 pi. That's plugging in, oops, forgot to type the 2. 2 pi, that's when you're plugging in 2 for n in your table. And both those values are still between 0 and 2 pi, or 0 and 6.28. But if you plug in x plus 3 pi, you'll see that that's too big. So that's over 6.28. So the two solutions we're going to keep are 2.13 and 5.27. And then here is your assignment. It's all on Canvas. You're going to finish the I Love Proofs and then do these problems from your book. And all the answers are online.